it was a wonderful group of very diverse people who worked together brilliantly, memorable also because we visited a number of different cities to take evidence. I will never forget the evidence about the position of the Roma in Hungary, or an encounter with the His All Holiness, the Patriarch of the Greek Orthodox Church in Istanbul, or might one say Constantinople. Of course, issues like the hijab were controversial in the group, but I would say that on the whole, it was remarkable about how a group coming from such different perspectives, Russian, Turkish, French Republican, British Liberal, had so much common ground. And I think we can be very proud of the rather coherent approach we adopted, which was all about the question, how do we combine liberty and diversity? First of all, we weren't all academics by any means. Joschka Fischer is, with all his intellectual achievements, a politician, and so is Emma Bernino. And secondly, this was very clearly about public policy recommendations across the larger Europe, and that's important to say, the Europe of the 47 member countries of the Council of Europe. One should not underestimate the longer term, slow, filter down effect of this report and others. I think we have contributed a little to moving the debate away from the polarized and rather frozen ideological debate about multiculturalism for or against. I'm very, very happy with the approach we took, because it avoids all those endless ideological debates about multiculturalism, what it is and what it isn't. And in a sense, you can go back to the liberal classics, to John Stuart Mill and to Isaiah Berlin, one of my great mentors, to understand the challenge of liberal pluralism. In terms of the British experience, we are, of course, a very peculiar country, because Britain is a nation composed of 4 nations. So we already have our multinational identity even before immigration. So there's a certain experience with, can I put it this way, muddling through with multiple identities. In some British cities, multiculturalism meant a retreat from basic fundamental principles of a free and open society. For example, the equality of men and women, the right to choose who you marry yourself, the treatment of young women. And we did go in some places quite far down the route of cultural relativism and so-called parallel societies. In old times, someone called them ghettos. So I think it was a necessary critique of multiculturalism, but we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And that's why we move it away from the ideological debate about the term, which we discovered in the group means something different in almost every country, to the reality on the ground. So, as you know, it depends what language we're speaking, because secularism in English is something different from laïcité in French. And my view is that we need the secularism more of John Locke than of Voltaire. Someone put it very well. They said that Voltaire's version, which became the French laïcité, is freedom from religion, and Locke's version is freedom for religion in the public sphere. I speak as an atheist myself, so of course that has to include freedom for atheists, but I think we need a public sphere in which all religions and none can speak freely. I think that in England we should disestablish the church. I think it's a nonsense in the 21st century liberal society to have an established church, but I would allow more freedoms for articulation of religious identity in the public sphere than in France. In my view, I regard, for example, the debate about the burqa as a totally marginal and slightly absurd debate, a displacement debate. In reality, it's a matter of a few thousand women in France some of whom we know have freely chosen to wear this rather uncomfortable garb. That seems to me an example where we should be more tolerant and more relaxed while defending the essentials of a free society, such as free speech. I think that obviously, because the larger Muslim populations from immigration are in Western Europe, you have a particular complex there. But we forget that in the Balkans, in countries like Bosnia and Kosovo, you've had Muslim communities for centuries. In Eastern Europe, the most shocking example of intolerance, discrimination, harassment, inequality is the treatment of the Roma. And this is something that we in the west of Europe have hardly woken up to, but in many respects it's worse than all but the very worst treatment of Muslims in Western Europe. If you take a country like Hungary, for example, or what's happening in some other European countries, the EU is proving so ineffective at upholding certain basic European values that we need the Europe of Strasbourg now more than ever. On the other hand, the subject areas have changed slightly, because now it is so much about the economy that I was, as you recently in Maastricht, speaking in that historic town, and they were explaining to me how Geert Wilders' rhetoric has become more anti-European of late, as well as anti-Islam, of course. And the populisms you see are somehow oriented towards the Eurozone crisis. You also have movements like the pirate parties, which are coming from somewhere completely else and are in many ways much more simpatico. So I think it has got worse, but I think it's also become more complicated. There are different vectors of fragmentation. Well, I think it is a structural problem of the European project that everyone looks to the European Union, but the Europe of rights and liberties and the rule of law is guarded and defined by the Council of Europe. So I would wish the Council of Europe to be more prominent altogether. It does so, of course, through the European Court of Human Rights, quite dramatically, but I would like to see its own publications identifying the strengths and weaknesses of different countries having more public impact.